Sometimes a man rides into the mountains not to find answers, but to lose his past. Caleb Ironwood came to the San Juan Peaks to disappear. He did not want a future. He only wanted silence, cold air, and enough distance from memory that it would finally stop hurting. 3 years had passed since Sarah died, and Caleb still counted the days. The smallpox had taken her slowly, cruelly. Toward the end, lying in their bed with the fever burning through her, she had made him promise. Her hand, thin as paper, had gripped his thick, scarred fingers with surprising strength. "Don't die in our house," she had whispered. "Don't rot here, surrounded by ghosts. Go back to the mountains, Caleb. Go back to where your heart belongs. Live. Don't just exist." He had tried to keep that promise. God knows he had tried, but living and existing felt like the same empty thing when the person who made life worth living was gone. Now, in the dead of winter 1883, Caleb Ironwood was 64 years old and felt every year of it. His body was a map of hard living. Thick muscles still corded his arms and shoulders, built from 45 years of trapping, hauling, and surviving in country that did not forgive weakness. But his knees ached with every step. His hands were gnarled and scarred. A long scar ran down his left cheek, a gift from a grizzly bear 20 years back. His beard, once black as coal, now hung long and gray-white down his chest. His hair, tied back with leather cord, matched the color of winter itself. He looked like what he was, a mountain man, a relic of an older, harder time. The climb up to the cabin took 3 days through snow that grew deeper with each mile gained. His horse, a sturdy Appaloosa named Buck, picked his way carefully through the drifts. Behind him, padding through the snow with the easy confidence of a creature born to it, came Thunder. Thunder was no ordinary dog. Half Malamute, half gray wolf, he stood nearly 3 feet at the shoulder. His fur was silver gray, his eyes pale blue, intelligent and watchful. He had been with Caleb for 8 years now, since the day Caleb found him as a pup, whimpering beside his dead mother. Thunder was the only living thing that had stayed when everything else fell apart. The cabin sat at 11,000 feet, high above the tree line where the pines thinned and the wind never truly rested. It had belonged to an old trapper named Ezekiel Horn, who died alone one winter, leaving no family behind. The structure was rough but solid, built by someone who understood that mistakes in the high country meant death. 1 room, a stone fireplace, a narrow bunk, a small corral for Buck. That was all Caleb needed. Thunder ran inside first when Caleb pushed open the door, his nails clicking against the wooden floor, his nose working overtime. The cabin smelled of dust, old smoke, and the particular emptiness of a place long abandoned. Caleb set down his pack and looked around. A table, 2 chairs, a shelf that held a few rusted traps, and an old slate with chalk. This would do. This would be where he waited for the end. The first 3 days passed in hard labor. Caleb patched the roof where snow had caved in part of it. He cleared the chimney of bird nests and debris. He fixed the corral fence for Buck and stacked enough firewood to survive the deep winter that was coming. His muscles screamed with the work, but the pain grounded him. It kept his mind from wandering to darker places. At night he sat by the fire while Thunder slept nearby, and the mountains pressed in with a silence so deep it felt alive. This was what he had come for. This emptiness, this cold, clean erasure of everything that hurt. But the mountains, Caleb would learn, do not let a man simply disappear. They have their own plans, their own secrets. On the 4th morning, while checking the snare line he had set near a frozen creek, Caleb found something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The trap was empty, the bait gone. But around it in the fresh snow were tracks. Wolf tracks, large and numerous, 6, maybe 7 animals. And among them, something else. Something that made no sense. Bare human footprints, not boot prints, not the stumbling, desperate prints of someone lost and freezing. These prints moved with purpose, with confidence. They ran alongside the wolf tracks, matching their pace, sometimes overlapping, The feet were small, a child's feet or a young woman's, but no child could survive barefoot up here. No woman could run with wolves. Caleb knelt in the snow, his breath clouding in the frozen air. He touched one of the prints with his gloved hand. Fresh, made within the last few hours. Thunder whined softly beside him, his ears flat against his head, his whole body tense. "You smell it too, don't you, boy?" Caleb muttered. "Something's not right here." He told no one. There was no one to tell. His nearest neighbor lived 15 miles down the mountain in Silverton, and Caleb had not come up here to make conversation. He had come to be alone. But over the next 3 nights, the signs continued. Every morning, his traps were empty, the bait taken. Bones appeared near the cabin, arranged in strange patterns that looked almost ceremonial. Scratches marked trees at odd heights. And always, always, the feeling of being watched. Thunder sensed it most. He spent hours on the porch, staring into the forest, whining in a way Caleb had never heard before. Not aggressive, not afraid exactly, just confused, as if he could not understand what he was smelling, what he was seeing in those trees. Then on the 7th night, just after sunset painted the snow orange and gold, Caleb saw them. He was standing on the porch, coffee cup in hand, when they emerged from the tree line. 6 wolves moving in a loose pack across the clearing. Large, powerful animals, their fur thick against the cold. They moved with the calm confidence of apex predators in their own territory. And with them was a girl. She moved like the wolves, sometimes on 2 feet, loping forward with a strange, fluid gait, sometimes dropping to all 4s, running that way as naturally as walking. She wore clothes of rough-sewn deerskin, primitive and weathered. Her hair was long and black and wild, tangled with bits of pine needle and ice. Her skin was brown, darkened by sun and wind. She could not have been more than 17 years old. Caleb froze. The coffee went cold in his hand. He did not move, did not breathe, as the wolves and the girl crossed the clearing perhaps 50 yards from his cabin. They were not hunting, not stalking, just passing through, as if this was their regular path, their territory. The girl's head turned toward the cabin. For just a moment her eyes met Caleb's across the distance. They caught the dying light and flashed yellow gold, like an animal's eyes. Then she was gone, melting back into the forest with her pack as silently as they had come. That night, Caleb did not sleep. The wolves howled close to the cabin, their voices rising and falling in harmonies that sounded almost like song. And beneath their howling, Caleb thought he heard something else. A voice that was almost human, but not quite. Calling, singing. Thunder pressed against his leg, uneasy but quiet, as if he too was trying to understand what was happening. By morning, the truth was written in the snow. Wolf prints everywhere circling the cabin, and barefoot tracks that walked right up to his door, paused there for long minutes, then turned back toward the trees. The girl was real, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Caleb Ironwood felt something stir inside him that was not grief. It was curiosity. It was purpose. It was fear mixed with wonder. That evening, acting on instinct older than thought, he took action. He placed food on a flat rock 20 yards from the cabin, venison from a deer he had shot, dried apples from his supplies, a piece of hardtack bread. Then he retreated inside and waited, watching through the gap in the shutters. The wolves came first as darkness fell. They circled the food cautiously, sniffing, but did not touch it. They were waiting. Then she appeared. The girl moved low to the ground, alert, her head swiveling to scan for danger. She approached the rock slowly, testing the air with each step. When she reached the food, she grabbed the venison in one quick motion and retreated several paces before crouching to eat. Her eyes never left the cabin. Even as she tore into the meat with strong white teeth, her gaze remained fixed on Caleb's door. Sharp, intelligent, calculating. When she finished, she stood. For a long moment she stared at the cabin. Then she did something that stopped Caleb's heart. She raised her hand, palm up. Not a wave, not a threat. A gesture that looked almost like thanks, like acknowledgement. Then she turned and vanished into the night with her pack. Caleb stood there in the darkness of his cabin, Thunder beside him, and felt his hands trembling. Not from fear, from something else entirely. "What in God's name?" he whispered to the empty room. He did not understand it. He did not understand any of it. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. His quiet ending, his peaceful fade into nothing, had just been taken from him. The mountains had other plans, and this strange wild girl was part of them. For 6 nights he left food. For 6 nights she came and took it, always with the wolves, always watching him with those eerily intelligent eyes. On the 5th night she left something behind. A single eagle feather, placed carefully on the rock where the food had been. Caleb picked it up with shaking hands. He knew what this was. Sarah had taught him. An eagle feather was sacred to the native peoples of these mountains. It was a peace offering, a sign of respect. "You are a smart one, aren't you?" he said to the darkness, knowing somehow that she could hear him. On the 7th night, everything changed. Caleb sat on his porch as the sun set, Thunder at his feet. The cold bit through his coat, but he barely felt it. He was waiting. He knew she would come, and she did. But this time, she did not stay in the shadows. This time, she came closer, 30 feet from the cabin, then 20. Then she sat down in the snow, cross-legged, and simply looked at him. Caleb's heart hammered in his chest. Slowly, carefully, he reached to the porch railing where he had set a tin cup of water. He held it up, then pointed to his mouth, drank, set it down. "Water," he said clearly. The girl tilted her head, watching. He pointed to the fire crackling behind him in the cabin. "Fire!" She made a sound, low, almost a hum, considering. Caleb pointed to Thunder. "Dog." Thunder's tail wagged once. The girl's eyes tracked to the animal, then back to Caleb. Then, in a voice rough from disuse, cracked and uncertain, she spoke. "Failure." Caleb felt tears burn his eyes. He blinked them back, cleared his throat. "Yes, fire. That's right." She stood then, as quickly as she had sat. For a moment Caleb thought she would run. But instead she pointed to herself, tapped her chest, made a sound that might have been a word in some language he did not know. Then she pointed to him, questioning. "Caleb," he said. "My name is Caleb." She repeated it, mangling the pronunciation, but trying. "Caleb." He smiled. He could not help it. "Close enough." She did not smile back, but something in her posture relaxed, just slightly, just enough to tell him that a barrier had been crossed. Thunder stood and before Caleb could stop him, walked off the porch toward the girl. Caleb tensed, ready to call him back, but Thunder just sat down in the snow between them, tail wagging, looking from one to the other as if to say, "See? We are all friends here." The girl looked at Thunder for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched the top of his head. Her hand was small and brown and scarred. Thunder leaned into her touch, eyes closing with contentment. When she pulled her hand back, she looked at Caleb one more time. Then she turned and walked back into the forest, where her wolves waited in the shadows. But Caleb knew she would come back. Whatever this was, whatever strange twist of fate had brought them together, it was not over. It was only beginning. That night, as he lay in his bunk with Thunder curled at his feet, Caleb stared at the ceiling and thought about Sarah's last words. Live. Don't just exist. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand what she meant. The cabin no longer felt like a place to die. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous, impossible, and alive. And Caleb Ironwood, who had come to these mountains to disappear, found himself wanting to stay, not to wait for the end, but to see what came next. The girl returned the next evening as the sun bled red across the western peaks. This time she came alone, without her wolves, and that told Caleb something important. She was testing him, testing whether he could be trusted without her pack as protection. She sat in the same spot as before, 20 feet from the porch, cross-legged in the snow. Thunder immediately rose and padded over to her, tail wagging. She scratched behind his ears, and the big dog leaned into her touch like they had known each other for years. Caleb watched from his rocking chair, coffee steaming in his hands. He did not speak at first, just let the silence settle between them, comfortable and cautious. Finally, he pointed to the sky. "Sky." She looked up, then back at him. "Ski." He pointed to the snow. "Snow. Snow." He pointed to himself. "Man." She studied him for a long moment, then pointed to herself and said something in a language that sounded like water over stones, musical and harsh at the same time. "What does that mean?" Caleb asked. She pointed to the moon, just rising pale and thin over the eastern mountains. Then to herself again, repeated the word. "Moon," Caleb said. "Your name means moon?" She tilted her head, not understanding all his words, but catching the meaning. She nodded once. "Can't keep calling you girl," Caleb said. "Need a name I can say." He thought for a moment, remembering Sarah and her stories about the Apache people she had grown up near. "Aayita. That's Apache, means first to dance. You move like a dancer, like water. Aayita." The girl, Aayita, repeated it slowly, testing the sound. Then she nodded. Acceptance. Over the next 3 days, they built something fragile and strange, a language made of gestures and simple words. Aayita learned quickly, hungrily, as if some part of her had been waiting for this, waiting for human connection she did not know she needed. Caleb learned too. He learned that Aayita was not just wild, she was brilliant. When he showed her how to write letters in the snow with a stick, she grasped the concept immediately. Within an hour, she had written her name, Ayita. The letters were shaky and uneven, but they were there. Thunder became the bridge between their worlds. Aayita would sit with the dog for hours, speaking to him in her strange mix of sounds, some human, some animal. Thunder listened with his head cocked, tail wagging, as if he understood perfectly. On the third evening, Caleb tried something new. He heated water in his iron pot and made stew with venison, potatoes, and wild onions. The smell filled the cabin, rich and savory. He ladled out 2 bowls, set them on the porch, and gestured for Aayita to come closer. She approached cautiously, sniffing the air. When she saw the spoon Caleb was using, she frowned. He demonstrated, lifting the spoon to his mouth, sipping the hot broth. Aayita picked up her spoon awkwardly, tried to mimic him, and spilled most of it down her deerskin shirt. She looked at Caleb, then at the spoon, then back at him, and laughed. It was a rough, unused sound, like hinges that had not moved in years, but it was genuine, real, human. Caleb found himself laughing too, and it surprised him how good it felt. "Yeah, spoons take practice," he said. "You'll get it." She did. Within minutes she was eating carefully, learning the rhythm of it, and when she finished, she looked at Caleb and said clearly, "Good." "Yes," he said, his throat tight. "Good." But that night, as the fire burned low and Aayita sat on the porch step with Thunder beside her, Caleb saw something in her face. A distance, a sadness that had not been there before. "You miss them," he said quietly. "Your wolves." She looked at him, and he saw understanding in her eyes. She nodded. "They're your family." Another nod. Then she pointed to herself, then to the forest, then to Caleb. The gesture was clear. She was caught between 2 worlds now, and it hurt. Caleb sat forward in his chair. "Listen to me. You don't have to choose. Not yet. Not ever, if you don't want to. You can be both, wild and human. It's not one or the other." He did not know if she understood all the words. but something in his tone reached her. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. That was when they heard the horses. The sound came from down the mountain, faint at first, then growing louder. Multiple animals, moving fast through the snow. Caleb was on his feet instantly, his old Sharps rifle in his hands. Thunder growled low in his chest. Aayita stood too, her body coiled and ready. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with sharp awareness. She whistled once, a high, piercing sound that carried across the clearing. Within seconds, 6 wolves materialized from the tree line, silent as smoke. They formed a loose circle around Aayita, their eyes fixed on the direction of the approaching horses. 3 riders burst into the clearing, their mounts snorting and stamping. They were rough men, dressed in heavy coats and fur hats, carrying rifles across their saddles. Hired guns, mountain trash. Caleb knew the type. The lead rider, a thick man with a scarred face and mean eyes, pulled his horse up short when he saw the wolves. His hand moved to his rifle. "Don't," Caleb said, his voice flat and hard. He leveled his Sharps at the man's chest. "You touch that rifle, you die before you clear leather." The man's hand froze. His eyes flicked from Caleb to Aayita, to the wolves and back. "We don't want trouble, old man. Just want the girl." "No. Colonel Cain's offering $300 for her. Says she's been killing livestock down in the valley. Says she's dangerous." "Colonel Cain's a liar," Caleb said. "And you boys are trespassing. Turn around. Ride back down that mountain. Don't come back." One of the other riders, younger and cockier, laughed. "You gonna stop all 3 of us, Grandpa?" Thunder's growl deepened. The wolves shifted, their circle tightening. Aayita made a sound, low and rhythmic, and the wolves' hackles rose. They did not attack, but the promise of violence hung in the air like cordite smoke. The lead rider licked his lips. "Cain ain't gonna like this." "I don't care what Cain likes," Caleb said. "The girl stays. That's not negotiable. He'll send more men. Soldiers, maybe." "Let him send an army. My answer's the same." For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind in the pines and the nervous stamping of horses. Then the lead rider spat in the snow. "Your funeral, old man." They wheeled their horses and rode back into the forest, moving fast and angry. But Caleb knew. This was not over. This was just beginning. When the sound of hoofbeats faded, Aayita turned to him. Her face was pale beneath her tan, her eyes wide. She pointed to herself, then made a gesture like pushing him away, trying to tell him she should leave, that she was bringing danger to him. "No," Caleb said firmly. He set down his rifle and walked to her. Slowly, carefully, he put his hand on her shoulder. She tensed but did not pull away. "You stay. We're family now. Family protects family." She repeated the words, tasting them. "Family." "That's right. Family." She looked at him for a long time, and Caleb saw something shift in her expression. Trust, fragile and new, but real. The wolves relaxed their circle but did not leave. They settled in around the cabin, 6 large shapes in the snow, keeping watch. Aayita sat back down on the porch step, and Thunder curled up beside her. Caleb sat in his chair and began to think. If Cain was sending men, he would send more. And next time they would not come in daylight with warnings. They would come at night, with fire and bullets. He needed to be ready. Over the next 2 days, preparations began. Caleb showed Aayita his rifle, how it worked, how to aim and squeeze the trigger gently. She watched with intense focus, absorbing everything. On her first attempt, she hit a pine cone at 30 yards. "Natural shooter," Caleb muttered. "God help us all." They dug pits around the cabin, 3 feet deep, covered with branches and snow. Simple traps, but effective against horses or men moving too fast in the dark. Aayita showed Caleb where to place them, drawing maps in the snow with a stick. Her tactical mind was sharp. She thought like a hunter, like a warrior. At night, Aayita taught the wolves signals. Caleb watched in fascination as she communicated with them through sounds and gestures. She showed them positions around the cabin, places to hide, paths to use for flanking attacks. The wolves understood. They were not just animals. They were soldiers in her pack. On the fourth morning after the riders came, Caleb saddled Buck and prepared to ride down to Silverton. He needed supplies, more ammunition, and information about this Colonel Cain. Aayita tried to stop him, grabbing his arm, shaking her head. "I have to," Caleb said. "We need to know what we're dealing with. I'll be back before dark." She pointed to herself, then to Buck, wanting to come with him. "Too dangerous. If they see you in town, they'll try to take you. You're safer here with your pack." She frowned, unhappy, but finally nodded. She watched from the porch as he rode out, Thunder and the wolves beside her. The last thing Caleb saw before the trees swallowed him was her small figure standing guard, fierce and alone. The ride to Silverton took 3 hours. The town was a rough mining settlement, all wooden buildings and muddy streets. Caleb tied Buck outside the general store and went inside. The owner, a balding man named Henderson, looked up in surprise. "Caleb Ironwood. Heard you were dead." "Not yet," Caleb said. "Need ammunition, 4440 and 4570. Henderson pulled boxes from the shelf. "Expecting trouble?" "Trouble found me." "Heard about that. Talks all over town. Colonel Cain's been asking questions. Says there's a wild thing up in the high country. Says it killed 2 calves on the Morrison Ranch." "That's a lie." Henderson shrugged. "Maybe, but Cain's got money and men. People listen to money." Caleb paid for the ammunition and left. But before he could mount Buck, a woman's voice stopped him. "Excuse me, are you Caleb Ironwood?" He turned. The woman was perhaps 40, dressed in a simple gray dress with a wool shawl. Her face was kind but worn with worry. Her eyes were dark and direct. "I am," Caleb said. "My name is Sarah Whitfield. I'm a teacher here. I heard you talking to Mr. Henderson." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The girl you're protecting. Can I ask you something about her?" Caleb tensed. "Depends on the question. Does she have a scar on her left shoulder, shaped like a bear's claw?" Everything in Caleb went still. "How do you know that?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because 15 years ago, my niece was taken. She was 2 years old. The last time I saw her, she had that scar. She got it when she was a baby, fell against a sharp stone." Caleb felt the world tilt. "Your niece?" "Her name was Aayita. Her mother, my sister, was Apache. She lived with her husband's people near Fort Sumner. In 1868, there was a raid. Soldiers attacked the camp. My sister was killed. Aayita disappeared. Everyone thought she died too." Sarah wiped her eyes. "But I never stopped looking. And 3 months ago I heard stories about a girl who runs with wolves up in the San Juan Mountains." Caleb's mind was racing. Fort Sumner, 1868. He knew that story. Everyone did. It had been a massacre. Women and children killed. But the official report said it was a battle against hostiles. "Who led that raid?" Caleb asked quietly. "Colonel Garrett Cain," Sarah said. "He was a captain then. They gave him a promotion afterward." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Cain had not been sent to protect livestock. He had come to silence a witness, a living witness to a war crime he had committed 15 years ago. "Jesus," Caleb whispered. "Please," Sarah said. "If she's alive, if you're protecting her, let me help. Let me see her. I'm the only family she has left." Caleb looked at this woman, saw the desperate hope in her eyes, and made a decision. "Come with me, but we ride now. And when we get to my cabin, you do exactly what I say. She's not the little girl you remember. She's something else now, something wild. You have to respect that." "I will," Sarah promised. "I just want her to know she's not alone." They rode back to the cabin as the sun began to set. When they came into the clearing, Aayita was already on the porch, alerted by the wolves. When she saw the woman with Caleb, she tensed, ready to run. "It's okay," Caleb called. "She's here to help." But Sarah did not wait for permission. She dismounted and pulled something from her coat pocket, a small wooden box, old and weathered. She opened it, wound a tiny key, and music began to play. A lullaby, slow and sweet and heartbreaking. Aayita froze. Her face went pale. Her breathing quickened. Sarah began to sing, her voice soft and clear in the Apache language, the same words Caleb had heard Aayita humming to herself at night. Tears rolled down Aayita's face before she understood what they were. Her body trembled. The wolves moved close, pressing against her, sensing her distress. Sarah stopped singing. "Little Moon," she said in English. "That's what your mother called you, Little Moon. Do you remember?" Aayita's lips moved, shaped words she had not spoken in 15 years. "Mama." "Yes," Sarah whispered. "I'm not your mama, but I'm her sister. I'm your aunt, and I have been looking for you for so long." Before anyone could move, the forest exploded with gunfire. Bullets tore through the clearing, splintering wood, kicking up snow. 4 men charged from the tree line, rifles blazing. Cain's men, more of them, better armed. Caleb grabbed his sharps and returned fire, dropping one man with a shot through the chest. Thunder and the wolves attacked, a blur of teeth and fur. Sarah screamed and dove behind the porch. Aayita did not run. She picked up Caleb's spare rifle, the one he had been teaching her with, and fired. The recoil knocked her back, but her shot was true. A second man went down, clutching his leg. The remaining 2 men retreated, firing wildly. One of them shouted, "The Colonel wants her alive! The $300 bounty still stands!" Caleb fired again, missed. The men disappeared into the forest, leaving their wounded behind. In the sudden silence that followed, everyone was breathing hard. Sarah stared at Aayita in shock. Aayita stared back, the rifle still smoking in her hands. Then Aayita did something that surprised them all. She lowered the rifle and walked to Sarah. She looked at the older woman for a long moment, then reached out and touched her face, as if making sure she was real. "Family?" Aayita asked. Sarah nodded, tears streaming. "Yes, family." Aayita looked at Caleb, then back at Sarah, then at the wolves gathered around them. Understanding dawned in her eyes. She had more than one family now, more than one pack. She spoke slowly, carefully, using all the English she had learned. "We fight. Together." Caleb reloaded his rifle, his jaw set. "Damn right we do." Because he knew now. Cain would not stop. The man had too much to lose. He would come with everything he had. And when he did, they would be ready. The wounded man talked. He talked because Caleb Ironwood stood over him with a look that promised things worse than death, and because Sarah Whitfield tended his leg wound with a gentleness that shamed him into honesty. His name was Dutch. He was 23 years old. He had come west looking for work and found it with Colonel Cain, who paid well and asked few questions. He did not know about Fort Sumner, did not know about the massacre. He only knew Cain wanted the wolf girl brought in, dead or alive, and was willing to pay top dollar for it. "How many men does Cain have?" Caleb asked. 20, maybe 25. Mix of ranch hands and hired guns. He's got them camped down at Morrison's place, 5 miles south. "When are they coming?" Dutch swallowed hard. "Tomorrow night, all of them. Cain's done playing. He wants this finished." Caleb looked at Aayita, who stood by the window watching the tree line. She had understood enough of the conversation to know what was coming. Her face was calm, but her hands were tight on the rifle. 25 men, Sarah said quietly. "We can't fight that many." "No," Caleb agreed. "We can't. Not alone." He turned to Dutch. "You're going to do something for me. You're going to ride back down that mountain and tell every person you meet that Colonel Garrett Cain is coming to murder a 17-year-old girl to cover up a war crime. You're going to tell them about Fort Sumner, about the Apache women and children he butchered. You're going to tell the truth, and you're going to tell it loud. Cain will kill me. Maybe. But if you don't do it, I will. and I'll make it hurt." Dutch looked into Caleb's eyes and saw something there that convinced him. He nodded. They bandaged his leg properly, gave him water and food, and sent him on his way with his horse. Whether he would actually spread the word or just run, Caleb could not know, but it was worth the gamble. After Dutch left, Sarah turned to Caleb. "We need help. Real help. There's a marshal in Silverton, Henry Moss. He's a good man, honest. Will he believe us?" "If I'm with you, yes. He knows me, knows I don't lie." She looked at Aayita. "But she'll have to come with us. He'll need to see her, hear her story." Aayita shook her head violently when Caleb translated the plan. She pointed to the mountains, to her wolves. This was her home. These were her people. Going down to the town meant leaving them vulnerable. "I know," Caleb said gently. "I know it's hard, but Sarah's right. We can't fight this alone. We need the law on our side." Aayita looked at Sarah, then back at Caleb. Finally she nodded, but her hand found Thunder's head and gripped his fur tightly, anchoring herself. They left at dawn, the three of them. Aayita rode behind Caleb on Buck, her arms wrapped around his waist, her body tense as a drawn bowstring. The wolves followed for the first mile, then melted back into the forest at some unspoken command from Aayita. Only Thunder came with them, trotting alongside the horses. The ride down took 4 hours. With each mile, Aayita grew more uneasy. She flinched at every sound. Her breathing came quick and shallow. Caleb could feel her trembling against his back. "You're doing good," he told her. "Real good. Just a little further." When Silverton came into view, Aayita made a sound in her throat like a trapped animal. The town seemed enormous to her. Dozens of buildings, hundreds of people, smoke and noise and chaos. "Easy," Caleb murmured. "I'm right here. Sarah's right here. Nobody's going to hurt you." They rode straight to the marshal's office, a squat wooden building at the end of Main Street. Marshal Henry Moss was a weathered man of 55, with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked up from his desk when they entered, and his gaze went immediately to Aayita. She stood close to Caleb, one hand on Thunder's collar, the other gripping Caleb's arm. Her eyes were wide, darting around the room, tracking exits and threats. "Henry," Sarah said, "we need to talk to you. It's about Colonel Cain." Moss's expression hardened. "I'm listening." They told him everything. Caleb spoke first, laying out the attacks on his cabin, Cain's bounty, the hired guns. Sarah filled in the history. Fort Sumner, the massacre, her sister's death, Aayita's disappearance. "And you're sure this is your niece?" Moss asked. Sarah nodded. "She has the scar. She remembered the lullaby. And she looks exactly like my sister did at that age." Moss turned to Aayita. "Can you tell me what happened? In your own words?" Aayita looked at Caleb. He nodded encouragement. She took a breath and spoke slowly, carefully, in the broken English she had learned. "Men come, fire, screaming. Mama hide me, Mama sing. Then, nothing. Dark, cold, alone." Her voice cracked. "Wolves find me. Wolves, family. Wolves teach, hunt, live, survive." "For 15 years, Moss said softly. "My God." "Cain knows she's alive," Caleb said. "He knows she's a witness to what he did. That's why he wants her dead. Not because of livestock, because of truth." Moss was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to a file cabinet, and pulled out a folder. "I've been trying to build a case against Cain for 3 years. Corruption, extortion, land fraud. But he's careful, connected. I've never been able to make anything stick." He opened the folder, showed them documents. "But if she testifies, if she tells a court what happened at Fort Sumner, it changes everything." "She can't testify if she's dead," Caleb said. "No, which is why we need to move fast." Moss put on his hat. I'm going to talk to some people. See who I can trust. You three stay here. Don't go back to that cabin. Cain will be watching it." But before Moss could leave, the door burst open. A young deputy stumbled in, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Marshal, there's trouble. 4 of Cain's men just shot up the saloon. They're looking for the mountain man and the wolf girl." Caleb grabbed his rifle. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. They're at Miller's place right now." Aayita was already moving toward the door, but Caleb caught her arm. "No, not yet. We don't go looking for fights we can avoid. They'll tear this town apart looking for her," Moss said. "We need to end this. Now." "Then we make a stand," Caleb said. "On our terms, not theirs." They moved quickly. Moss deputized Caleb on the spot, pressed a badge into his hand. Sarah took Aayita to the back room of the marshal's office where she would be safe. Thunder stayed with them, growling low whenever anyone came near. Caleb and Moss positioned themselves in the street outside Miller's saloon. Inside, they could hear shouting, breaking glass, a woman's scream. "Come out, old man," a voice bellowed. "We know you're in town. Give us the girl and nobody else gets hurt." Moss cupped his hands around his mouth. "This is Marshal Moss. You're under arrest for assault and destruction of property. Come out with your hands up." The response was a gunshot that shattered the marshal's office window. "That's how it's going to be," Moss muttered. He looked at Caleb. "You ready for this?" "Been ready my whole life," Caleb said. The next few minutes were chaos. Cain's men burst out of the saloon, guns blazing. Caleb and Moss returned fire from behind a water trough. Bullets ricocheted off buildings. Townspeople screamed and ran for cover. One of Cain's men went down with a bullet through the shoulder. Another ducked behind a wagon. The fight was brief and brutal and loud. Then, from the window of the marshal's office, came a sound that froze everyone in place. A wolf's howl, high and clear and unmistakable. Aayita had climbed onto the roof. She stood there in her deerskin clothes, silhouetted against the afternoon sun, and howled again. The sound echoed through the town, primal and haunting, and from the mountains came an answer. 6 wolves burst into Main Street, running full speed, their fur bristling. They did not attack. They simply positioned themselves around the marshal's office, forming a protective ring. Their message was clear. Touch the girl, and you die. Cain's men broke. They ran for their horses, scrambled into saddles, and rode out of town at full gallop. Their courage had limits, and wolves were past those limits. In the sudden silence, Caleb looked up at Aayita on the roof. She was breathing hard, her fists clenched, but her face was set with determination. She had not run. She had not hidden. She had called her family and stood her ground. "That," Moss said quietly, "is the bravest thing I've ever seen." By evening, word had spread through Silverton like wildfire. The wolf girl was real. She had called wolves into town. She had faced down Cain's men without fear, and she was the key to bringing down the most powerful man in the territory. People began to gather at the marshal's office, not to gawk, not to threaten, to help. Henderson from the general store brought food. The blacksmith, a huge man named Garrett, offered his forge and his hammer. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house brought blankets. Even the minister showed up, Bible in hand, saying that whatever was right and true deserved protection. But the most important visitor came just after sunset. An old Apache man, bent with age, his face weathered like ancient leather. He walked with a carved staff, and his eyes were sharp and clear despite his years. "Samuel Walking Bear," he said when Moss opened the door. "People call me Red," Sarah gasped. "Red? Red Walking Bear? You were at Fort Sumner." "I was," the old man said. "I survived. Barely." He looked at Aayita, who stood frozen in the corner. "And I remember you, child. You were Aayana's daughter, the little moon." He spoke to her in Apache then, his voice gentle but firm. Aayita answered haltingly at first, then with more confidence as the language came back to her. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. When they finished, Red turned to the others. She remembers, not everything, but enough. She remembers the soldiers coming, the fire, her mother hiding her. She remembers Cain's face. "Will she testify?" Moss asked. Red spoke to Aayita again. She nodded, then said in English, "I testify. For Mama, for truth." "Then we have our case," Moss said. "But first we have to survive the night. Cain will come, all of his men. He's got nothing to lose now." "How many can we count on?" Caleb asked. Moss looked around the crowded office. 15, maybe 20 men willing to fight. Plus your wolves. "And me," Sarah said firmly. "And me," Red added. "I'm old, but I can still shoot." They spent the night preparing. The townspeople who could fight were armed with whatever weapons they could find. Rifles, shotguns, pistols. Caleb showed them how to position themselves for maximum coverage. Aayita and her wolves scouted the perimeter, silent and efficient. As midnight approached, Caleb found himself standing on the porch of the marshal's office with Red Walking Bear. The old Apache was smoking a long pipe, the smoke curling up into the cold night air. "You know," Red said quietly, "the Apache have a saying. The mountain keeps its promise. It protects those who respect it. You are a mountain man. You have respected the mountain, and it has given you a gift. That girl." "She's not a gift," Caleb said. "She's a person. She's family." Red smiled. "Yes, that is why the mountain chose you." He paused. "Tomorrow, when Cain comes, remember this. You are not fighting for yourself. You are fighting for something bigger, for justice, for truth, for the idea that the powerful cannot simply erase the weak." "I've never fought for ideas before," Caleb admitted, "just for survival." "Then tomorrow you will learn something new," Red said. "You will learn what it means to stand for something worth dying for." Inside the office, Aayita sat with Thunder and Sarah. The older woman was teaching her to write more words. Family, home, truth, justice. Each letter was a small victory, a reclaiming of the humanity that had been stolen from her 15 years ago. "You're very brave," Sarah told her. "Braver than I ever was." Aayita shook her head. "Caleb brave, you brave. I learn brave." "We learn from each other," Sarah said. She reached out and took Aayita's scarred hand in hers. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Aayita's eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. "You teach me? Teach me Mama's words? Apache words?" "Every day," Sarah promised, "for as long as you want." At dawn, a rider came. Not one of Cain's men. A rancher from down valley, a man named Morrison who had no love for Cain but had been too afraid to speak against him before. "Cain's coming," Morrison said, his horse lathered with sweat. 23 men, all armed. They'll be here within the hour. He's saying anyone who stands with the wolf girl is an enemy of civilization. He's calling it pest control." "He's calling it murder," Moss corrected. "And we're calling it justice." The townspeople took their positions. Rooftops, windows, behind wagons and barrels. Caleb stood in the center of Main Street with his Sharps rifle, Aayita beside him with her borrowed Winchester. Thunder and the wolves waited in the shadows, invisible but present. Sarah and Red were positioned in the church tower, the highest point in town. They would be the eyes, signaling when Cain's force approached. "You don't have to stand here," Caleb told Aayita. "You can hide. Stay safe. Let us handle this." She met his gaze directly, her eyes bright with determination. "Family fight together." "Yeah," Caleb said, his chest tight. "Yeah, we do." The sun climbed higher. The town held its breath. And then, like a dark stain spreading across the snow, Cain's men appeared on the southern road. 23 riders, armed to the teeth, moving with the confidence of men who thought they had already won. At their head rode Colonel Garrett Cain himself. He was a tall man, still military in bearing despite being in his 50s. His face was hard and weathered, his eyes cold. But there was something else there too, something that looked almost like fear. Because he knew. He knew that if this girl talked, if she told her story, everything he had built would come crashing down. The riders stopped 50 yards from the center of town. Cain raised his hand, and his men halted. For a long moment he simply stared at Aayita, who stood defiant in the street, rifle in hand, wolves at her side. "Miss," Cain called out, his voice carrying across the distance, "you don't have to die today. Come with me peacefully. We'll sort this out like civilized people." "Like you sorted it out at Fort Sumner?" Caleb shouted back. "When you murdered her mother and tried to murder her?" Cain's face went white, then red. "You don't know what you're talking about, old man." "I know enough. And so do the 50 people in this town who are pointing guns at you right now. So do the citizens of Denver who are going to hear this girl's testimony. So does God if you believe in him." "I was following orders," Cain said, and for the first time his voice cracked. "It was war. People die in war." "Children?" Red's voice rang out from the church tower, strong despite his age. "You murdered children and called it war?" Cain's horse shifted nervously beneath him. His men were looking at each other now, uncertain. This was not what they had signed up for. "Last chance," Moss called. "Surrender now, and you'll get a fair trial. Force this fight, and some of you won't leave this town alive." Cain's hand moved toward his rifle. "To hell with all of you." And then Aayita did something no one expected. She stepped forward, alone, unarmed, and spoke. Her English was rough, but her voice carried clear and strong. "I remember you," she said to Cain. "I remember your face. You come to my village. You say we safe. Then you bring soldiers. You bring fire. You kill my mother. You take me. Sell me." Her voice grew stronger. "But I live. I survive. And now I tell truth." "You know, stop truth." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye was on this girl who had lived with wolves, who had been more animal than human for 15 years, now standing tall and speaking truth to power. Cain's face twisted with rage and desperation. He drew his pistol, and all hell broke loose. The first shot came from Cain's pistol, fired wild and desperate. The bullet went high, punching through the sign above the general store. It was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Caleb moved before thought, his body acting on 45 years of survival instinct. He grabbed Aayita and pulled her behind the water trough as bullets began to fly. Thunder was already there, pressed against her side. The wolves scattered into the alleys, moving like smoke, flanking positions already mapped in their minds. Gunfire erupted from every direction. The townspeople opened up from windows and rooftops. Cain's men returned fire, but they were exposed in the street, caught in a crossfire they had not anticipated. Within 30 seconds, 3 of them were down, clutching wounds, their horses screaming and bolting. "Hold your fire!" Moss shouted from his position behind a wagon. "Let them surrender!" But Cain was beyond reason. He spurred his horse forward, firing his pistol at anything that moved. His men followed, some out of loyalty, most out of pure terror. The street became a chaos of smoke and noise and violence. Caleb rose from behind the trough and fired his sharps. The heavy rifle bucked against his shoulder. A rider went down, his horse stumbling. Caleb reloaded with practiced speed, the muscle memory of a lifetime making his hands steady even as his heart hammered. Beside him, Aayita raised her Winchester. She had been trained for only a few days, but some people are born shooters. Her first shot took a man's hat off. Her second hit him in the leg. He tumbled from his saddle with a scream. "Good girl," Caleb said. "Keep your head down. Pick your shots." But Aayita was not listening. Her eyes were locked on Cain, who was charging toward them, his face twisted with rage and fear. She stood up, fully exposed, and raised her rifle. "Aayita, no!" Caleb shouted. She fired. The bullet caught Cain's horse in the chest. The animal went down hard, throwing Cain from the saddle. He hit the ground rolling, came up bloody and dazed, his pistol lost in the snow. The wolves chose that moment to attack. They came from 3 directions at once, 6 gray shapes moving with coordinated precision. They did not go for Cain. They went for his men, the ones still mounted, still dangerous. The wolves leaped at horses, not to kill but to terrorize. Horses reared and bucked, throwing riders. Men screamed. The organized charge became a panicked rout. "Fall back!" one of Cain's lieutenants shouted. "Fall back!" Half of Cain's men broke and ran, spurring their horses back toward the south road. The other half, either braver or more loyal, dismounted and took cover behind whatever they could find. The battle shifted from a charge to a siege. Moss moved through the chaos with calm authority, directing his people. "Henderson, cover that alley. Garrett, watch the side street. Nobody fires unless you've got a clear target." Red Walking Bear, despite his 70 years, was proving to be a deadly shot from the church tower. His old buffalo rifle boomed like thunder. Each shot was carefully aimed, precisely placed, not to kill, but to disable, to take the fight out of men without taking their lives. "The old ways," he muttered to Sarah, who crouched beside him reloading. "We were taught to fight only when necessary, and to end it as quickly as possible. No glory in prolonged suffering." Sarah was shaking but steady. She had never fired a gun in anger before, but she was learning fast. "How many are left?" "Too many. But their spirit is breaking. Watch." He was right. Cain's men were pinned down, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. They had expected an easy fight, a mountain man and a wild girl. Instead, they had found an entire town willing to die for justice. It was not what they signed up for. One by one, they began to surrender. Rifles were thrown down, hands were raised. Moss and his deputies moved carefully, disarming them, checking for wounds. The shooting slowed, then stopped entirely. All except for Cain. The colonel had crawled behind an overturned wagon, pistol recovered, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He was trapped, surrounded, but still dangerous, still desperate. "Cain!" Moss called. "It's over! Come out with your hands up!" "Go to hell, Moss!" Caleb moved closer, using wagons and barrels as cover. Aayita followed, ignoring his signals to stay back. Thunder stayed glued to her side, and 2 of the wolves had circled around, cutting off Cain's escape. "Colonel," Caleb said, his voice carrying across the 20 feet that separated them, "you can't win this. You've lost. Come out peaceful, face trial. At least die with some dignity." "Dignity?" Cain's laugh was bitter, broken. "You want to talk to me about dignity? I was a soldier. I followed orders. I did what my country asked me to do, and now you want to hang me for it?" "You murdered children," Caleb said flatly. "You took a 2-year-old girl and tried to sell her. Those weren't orders. That was choice. You don't understand. None of you understand. It was chaos. The Indians were hostiles. We were at war." "They were not at war," Red's voice rang out from the church tower. "We were at peace. We had signed treaties. We had laid down arms. You came in the night because we were easy targets, because you wanted glory and promotion. You got both, but you also got blood on your hands, blood that won't wash off." Cain was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, broken. "I see their faces, every night, every time I close my eyes. I see what we did. I've seen it for 15 years. "Then do the right thing now," Sarah called. "Come out. Face what you did. Let the truth be known. It won't erase the past, but it might give those children some justice." "And me? What do I get?" "What you deserve," Moss said. "A fair trial. A chance to speak your piece. More mercy than you showed at Fort Sumner." For a long moment, nothing happened. The town held its breath. Then Cain stood up, slowly, his pistol hanging loose in his hand. "All right," he said quietly. "All right." He started to raise his hands, and then his eyes locked on Aayita, and something in him snapped one final time. The pistol came up fast, aimed at the girl who was his living accusation. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Caleb's sharps, Moss's rifle, and Red's buffalo gun from the tower. All 3 bullets hit Cain within a heartbeat of each other. He staggered backward, the pistol falling from his hand. He looked down at his chest, at the blood blooming there, and his face showed not pain, but relief. "Finally," he whispered. "Finally." He fell. Caleb ran to him, but it was already over. Cain's eyes were open, staring at the sky, seeing nothing. Whatever demons had chased him for 15 years, they had caught up at last. Aayita stood frozen, staring at the dead man. Thunder whined and pressed against her. She reached down, her hand finding his fur, anchoring herself to something living and warm and real. "Is it over?" she asked in her careful English. "Is it finished?" "The fighting is," Caleb said. "But the healing? That takes longer." Moss moved through the aftermath, checking the wounded, organizing prisoners. 11 of Cain's men were captured, 3 were dead. The rest had fled and would likely keep running. The townspeople had suffered no deaths, though Henderson had taken a bullet through the shoulder and Mrs. Chen's boarding house had more holes than walls. As the sun climbed toward noon, the full scope of what had happened began to sink in. A colonel had been killed, a conspiracy exposed, a town had stood up to power and won. Word would spread fast. This would not be the end of trouble, but it was the end of Cain's particular brand of evil. Sarah came down from the church tower with Red. She went straight to Aayita and pulled her into a fierce hug. Aayita stiffened, unused to the touch, then slowly relaxed into it. Her arms came up, awkward and uncertain, and returned the embrace. "You were so brave," Sarah whispered. "So very brave." Scared," Aayita admitted. "But Caleb say family fight together, so I fight." Red approached Caleb, his old buffalo rifle slung over his shoulder. "You did well, mountain man. Sarah was right about you. You have honor." "Just did what needed doing," Caleb said. "No." Red shook his head. "You did more than that. You gave that girl a choice. You could have kept her hidden in your cabin, kept her wild and safe. But you brought her here. Let her face her past. Let her speak her truth. That took courage and wisdom. She's the one with courage. I just stood beside her." "That," Red said with a slight smile, "is what courage looks like." The celebration, if it could be called that, was muted. There was relief, yes, but also exhaustion and the knowledge that more work lay ahead. Cain's body was taken to the undertaker. His men were locked in the town jail, which was far too small for all of them. Some would have to be guarded in the church basement. Moss sent riders to Denver, to the territorial governor, to the army. What had happened here could not be swept under the rug. There would be investigations, inquiries, trials. The truth about Fort Sumner would come out, and heads would roll beyond just Cain's. As evening approached, Aayita sat on the steps of the marshal's office with Thunder and her wolves, which had returned from the shadows now that the danger had passed. The townspeople gave her space, though many looked at her with a mixture of awe and curiosity. One person did not keep her distance. A little girl, perhaps 8 years old, with braided blonde hair and a face full of freckles. She walked right up to Aayita and held out a small wooden doll. "My mama said you were very brave," the girl said. "I want you to have this. Her name is Rosie." Aayita took the doll with trembling hands. She had not held a toy in 15 years, did not remember what they were for. She looked at it, turning it over, examining it like it was some kind of sacred object. "Thank you," she said slowly. The little girl beamed and ran back to her mother. Aayita held the doll against her chest and for just a moment looked exactly like what she was. A 17-year-old girl who had been robbed of her childhood and was only now beginning to understand what she had lost. Caleb sat down beside her. His body ached. His hands shook slightly from the adrenaline draining away. He was too old for this kind of fight, but he had survived. They had survived. "What happens now?" Aayita asked. "Now. Moss will want you to testify. Not right away, but eventually. They'll bring in judges from Denver, build a proper case. You'll have to tell your story again, in front of important people." "I tell story," Aayita said with determination. "For Mama, for truth." "I know you will, and I'll be right there with you. Every step." "After? After I tell story?" Caleb looked at her. "That's up to you. You can stay here with Sarah. Learn to read and write properly. Learn how to live in the world of towns and people. Or you can go back to the mountain, back to your wolves. Or you can do both. Split your time. The choice is yours, Aayita. It's always been yours." She was quiet for a long time, stroking the wooden doll's hair. Finally she spoke. "I want both. I want learn. Want know words. Want know Mama's language. Want know why she die. But I want mountain too. Want wolves. Want wind and snow and quiet." "Then that's what you'll have," Caleb said. "Both worlds. You don't have to choose one over the other. You can be wild and civilized, Apache and whatever the hell you decide to be. You're not what happened to you, Aayita. You're what you choose to become." She looked at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. "What you choose? You stay mountain, or you stay here?" It was a good question. Caleb had come to the mountains to die. But something had changed. He had found a reason to live again, found a family in the most unexpected place. "I think," he said slowly, "I'll do what you do. Split my time. I've got a cabin that needs a caretaker in the summer, and I've got a girl who needs someone to teach her how to fix a roof and set a proper trap. And maybe, in the winter, I'll come down here, help Moss keep the peace, remind myself what it's like to be around people who aren't trying to kill me." Aayita smiled. It was still a rare expression on her face, but it was becoming more frequent. "Good. We be family. Both worlds. Together." "Together," Caleb agreed. That night, the town of Silverton held a different kind of gathering. Not a celebration. More like a reckoning. The townspeople came together in the church, filling the pews and standing along the walls. Red Walking Bear stood at the pulpit, though he was no minister. "What happened today," he said in his weathered voice, "was not just a fight. It was a choice. You chose truth over power, justice over comfort. That girl, that young woman who stands before you, is a witness to terrible things. She survived because the spirits willed it, because the wolves took pity, and because one man, Caleb Ironwood, had the decency to see her as human, not as some curiosity or threat." He paused, letting his words settle. "But her fight is not over. There will be more trials, more questions, more people who want to use her story for their own purposes. Some will want to civilize her, make her forget the wild. Others will want to keep her wild, make her a symbol. Neither is right. She deserves to choose her own path, and we, as a community, must protect that choice." There were murmurs of agreement throughout the church. "The Apache have a saying," Red continued. "A person is not lost until they forget who they are. That girl was taken from us 15 years ago, but she did not forget. Somewhere in her heart, buried deep, she remembered her mother, remembered her people, remembered that she was human. That is a kind of strength most of us will never know." He looked directly at Aayita, who sat in the front pew between Caleb and Sarah. "You are Aayita, daughter of Aayana, niece of Sarah, sister to the wolves, student of the mountain, and you are welcome here, always, in whatever form you choose to take." Aayita stood. She walked to the pulpit, and Red stepped aside. She looked out at all those faces. Some she recognized from the fight, others were strangers. But all of them looked at her with respect, not fear, not pity, respect. She spoke slowly, carefully, using all the English she had learned. "I thank you, all of you. You fought for me when you did not have to. You stood with me when it was dangerous." She paused, her voice growing stronger. "My mother died believing in peace. Her spirit lives in me, in this mountain, in the truth we spoke today. Cain tried to silence that truth, but truth is like water, like wind. You cannot stop it. It finds its way." There was absolute silence in the church. Then, slowly, people began to stand. One by one they rose to their feet, until the entire congregation was standing in silent tribute to this girl who had survived the impossible and found the courage to speak. Aayita looked at them all, and for the first time she understood something profound. She was not alone. She had never been alone. Her mother's spirit had protected her. The wolves had raised her. And now, these people, this strange community of miners and shopkeepers and farmers, had chosen to stand with her. She had lost one family 15 years ago, but she had gained another, and then another, and she was still standing. That night, after the gathering ended, Aayita stood on the roof of the marshal's office again, looking up at the mountains. They were dark shapes against the starlit sky, eternal and unchanging. Her wolves had gone back to the high country, sensing they were no longer needed. Thunder slept below, guarding the door. Sarah came up to join her, wrapped in a shawl against the cold. "Beautiful, isn't it? The mountains." "Home," Aayita said simply. "Both places can be home," Sarah said gently. "The mountain and the valley, the wild and the town. You're allowed to love both." "You teach me? Teach me live, both?" "Every day," Sarah promised. "We'll start with language, your mother's Apache words, then reading and writing, then whatever else you want to learn, music maybe, cooking, medicine, whatever calls to you." "And summer? I go back mountain?" "And summer, you go back to the mountain," Sarah confirmed. "I won't cage you, Aayita. You've been caged enough for one lifetime." Aayita looked at her aunt, this woman who had never stopped searching, never stopped hoping. "Why you keep look? 15 years? Why you no stop?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because you were family. Because my sister died trying to protect you. Because giving up would have meant her death was for nothing. And because somewhere deep in my heart I knew you were still alive. I could feel it." "I feel Mama too," Aayita whispered. "Sometimes. In wind. In dreams. She sing to me." They stood together in silence, aunt and niece, separated by 15 years but connected by blood and loss and hope. The mountain loomed before them, dark and eternal, keeping its promises in the way mountains do. Silent, strong, unchanging. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, testimony, trials, learning to navigate a world Aayita barely understood. But tonight, under the stars, with her aunt beside her and the mountain watching over them, Aayita felt something she had not felt in 15 years. Peace. That night, after the town fell silent, Aayita remained on the roof of Sarah's house. She sat with her knees drawn to her chest, thunder beside her, watching the stars wheel overhead. The violence of the day replayed in her mind, Cain's face as he fell, the sound of gunfire, the smell of smoke and blood. Sarah found her there near midnight. "Come down, child. You need rest." "I cannot sleep," Aayita said quietly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him falling. I see Mama falling. I see everything." "That's normal," Sarah said, climbing up to sit beside her. "The shaking will pass. The memories won't, but they'll fade. You're still human, Aayita. Still feeling. That's good." They sat together until dawn, watching the mountains turn from black to gray to gold. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Silverton had ever seen. The town became the center of a storm that reached all the way to Washington. Newspapers sent reporters, the Army sent investigators, The Department of Indian Affairs sent bureaucrats with leather briefcases and skeptical faces, and through it all, Aayita learned to live in two worlds at once. She stayed with Sarah in a small house at the edge of town. Every morning she woke to the sound of roosters instead of wolves. She ate at a table with plates and forks. She wore a simple cotton dress that felt strange and confining compared to her deerskin clothes, but she endured it because she had made a promise: to speak truth, to seek justice, to honor her mother's memory. Sarah was patient and kind. She taught Aayita to read, starting with simple words: cat, dog, home, tree. Aayita absorbed the lessons like parched earth absorbs rain. Within 2 weeks, she could read basic sentences. Within 4, she was working through a primer meant for children half her age, but she did not care. Each word was a key that unlocked more of the world her mother had wanted her to know. In the afternoons, Red Walking Bear came to visit. He taught her Apache, the language that lived somewhere deep in her memory, waiting to be awakened. He told her stories of her mother, of the people she came from, of their history and traditions. Aayita drank it all in, filling the empty spaces inside her with knowledge and connection. "You are becoming whole," Red told her one afternoon as they sat in Sarah's parlor. "For 15 years, you were only half of yourself, the wild half. Now you are finding the other half, the human half. Soon you will be complete." "Will I remember everything?" Aayita asked. "About before?" "Some things are lost forever," Red said honestly. "But the important things, the things that make you who you are, those will come back. Give it time." But time was something they were running out of. The trial was approaching. Marshal Moss had been busy. He had gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, built a case that stretched back 15 years. He had found 3 other survivors of Fort Sumner, Apache people who had scattered after the attack and lived in hiding, afraid to speak out. Now, with Cain dead and the truth coming to light, they were willing to testify. The territorial governor, under pressure from Washington and the press, appointed a special prosecutor, a stern man named Blackwood who had made his reputation putting away crooked land speculators. He came to Silverton 6 weeks after Cain's death and immediately requested to meet with Aayita. Caleb insisted on being present for the meeting. He had moved into town for the winter, taking a room above the general store, and had appointed himself Aayita's unofficial guardian. He did not trust lawyers, did not trust officials, and he sure as hell did not trust anyone who came from Washington. Blackwood was younger than Caleb expected, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He sat across from Aayita in Marshal Moss's office and studied her carefully before speaking. "Miss Whitfield," he began, using the name Sarah had given her legally, "I need you to understand what's at stake here. This trial is not just about Colonel Cain. He's dead. This is about exposing a system that allowed what happened at Fort Sumner to occur. That means powerful people are going to try to discredit you. They're going to say you're unreliable, that you've been living like an animal and can't be trusted, that your memory is faulty." "My memory is good," Aayita said clearly. Her English had improved dramatically. "I remember his face. I remember the fire. I remember my mother hiding me." "Good. But remembering is not enough. You have to be able to testify in front of a courtroom full of hostile lawyers. You have to stand up under cross-examination. You have to be absolutely certain of what you saw." "I am certain." Blackwood nodded. "Then let's prepare. We have 3 weeks until the trial. I need to know everything, every detail, no matter how small." For the next 3 weeks, Aayita relived the worst night of her life over and over again. Blackwood questioned her relentlessly, testing her memory, looking for inconsistencies. It was brutal and necessary. By the time he was satisfied, Aayita could recount the events of that night with precision and clarity that left no room for doubt. But the process took its toll. She grew thin and pale. Nightmares plagued her sleep. She would wake gasping, calling for her mother in Apache. Sarah would hold her, rock her, Sing the old lullabies until the terror passed. Caleb watched it all with a growing sense of anger. "This is too much," he told Sarah one evening. "They're breaking her." "They're preparing her," Sarah corrected gently. "The trial will be worse, much worse. She needs to be ready. She shouldn't have to do this. She's been through enough." "Yes, but she wants to do it. For her mother, for justice. We have to let her." Caleb knew Sarah was right, but that did not make it any easier to watch. The trial was held in the largest building in Silverton, the Masonic Hall, which had been converted into a temporary courthouse. Judges came from Denver. A jury was selected from men in the surrounding counties, men who had not been directly involved in the gunfight and could theoretically be impartial. The gallery was packed, every seat filled. People stood along the walls. Reporters sat with notebooks, pencils flying. This was the trial of the decade, and everyone wanted to witness it. Aayita sat at the front with Blackwood and Sarah. She wore a simple dark blue dress that Sarah had sewn for her. Her hair was braided and pinned back. She looked young and small and terrified. But when she caught Caleb's eye from where he sat in the gallery, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. The defense was handled by 3 lawyers from Colorado Springs, expensive men in expensive suits who represented the Army's interests. They did not deny that something had happened at Fort Sumner, but they argued that it was a legitimate military action against hostile forces, that Cain had followed orders, that regrettable things happen in war. When Aayita was called to the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She walked to the witness chair with Thunder at her heels. The dog had been allowed in the courtroom as a concession to her anxiety. He lay down at her feet, his presence a steady comfort. Blackwood approached her gently. "Please state your name for the record." "Aayita Whitfield, daughter of Aayana and John Whitfield, born 1866 at Fort Sumner." "And can you tell the court what happened on the night of September 12, 1868? Aayita took a breath, and then, in a clear, strong voice, she told her story. She described her village, the peace treaties that had been signed, the sense of safety that had lulled her people into letting down their guard. She described her mother putting her to bed, singing to her, stroking her hair. Then, late at night, I wake up. I hear shouting, screaming. I smell smoke. Her voice remained steady, clinical, as Blackwood had taught her. My mother grabs me. She runs. But the soldiers are everywhere. I see Captain Cain. I know it is him because his uniform is different from the others. He is giving orders, pointing, telling his men where to go. What orders do you hear? He says, "Burn everything. Leave nothing standing. No witnesses." Aayita's hands gripped the arms of the chair. My mother runs toward the rocks. There is a small cave. She puts me inside. She sings to me. She tells me to be quiet, to be brave. She says the spirits will protect me. And then? Then she leaves. She runs back toward the village. I think she is trying to draw the soldiers away from me. I hear gunshots, many gunshots. I hear her scream. Aayita's voice broke for the first time. Then nothing, just fire, and smoke, and crying. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Not a person moved. Not a breath was heard. "How long did you stay in that cave?" Blackwood asked gently. "I don't know. Hours. When morning comes, I come out. The village is gone. Burned. Bodies everywhere. I look for my mother. I find her near the creek. She is—" Aayita stopped, swallowed hard. "She is dead. I cry. I scream. But nobody comes. Everybody is dead or gone." "What happened next?" "I walk into the mountains. I am lost. Cold. Hungry. I think I will die. But then the wolves find me." Her face softened slightly. "The mother wolf. She has pups. She lets me stay with them, feeds me, keeps me warm. I learn to hunt, to survive, to be part of the pack. For 15 years, they are my family." "And you never saw another human in all that time?" "I see humans, from far away. But I hide. I am afraid. Afraid they will be like the soldiers, like Captain Cain." Blackwood nodded. "Thank you, Miss Whitfield. That was very brave." Then came the cross-examination. The defense attorney was a man named Hutchins, silver-haired and smooth-voiced. He approached Aayita like a snake approaching a mouse. "Miss Whitfield, or should I say the girl who calls herself Whitfield, you claim to remember events that happened when you were 2 years old. Is that correct?" "Yes." "That's remarkable. Most people can't remember anything before age 4 or 5. Yet you remember specific words, specific orders. How is that possible?" "I remember because I have thought about that night every day for 15 years, because it is burned into my mind like fire on skin, because I see my mother's face every time I close my eyes." "Or perhaps," Hutchins suggested smoothly, "you were told these things by others, by Mrs. Whitfield, who claims to be your aunt, by Mr. Walking Bear, who has his own grievances against the army. Perhaps your memories are actually stories they planted in your mind." "No," Aayita said firmly. "My memories are mine." "Are they? You've been living as an animal for 15 years. No language, no human contact. And suddenly, in just 6 weeks, you're speaking fluent English, recounting detailed events, acting like a civilized person. Isn't it more likely that you're simply a very good actress, trained by people with an agenda?" Caleb half rose from his seat, but Sarah's hand on his arm stopped him. Aayita looked directly at Hutchins. "You want to know if I am real? If my memories are real? I will show you." She stood up. Before anyone could stop her, she pulled down the shoulder of her dress, revealing the scar, the bare claw mark that had been there since infancy. "This is real. My aunt knew about this scar. Nobody else did. It proves who I am." She turned around, showing the courtroom other scars, claw marks, teeth marks, the map of a life lived in the wild. "These are real. 15 years surviving in the mountains, fighting, hunting, learning to be strong." She turned back to face Hutchins. "My memories are real. My pain is real. My mother's death is real. And Captain Cain, Colonel Cain, the man you defend, he is the one who killed her. He is the one who burned our village. He is the one who created the monster you see before you now." The courtroom erupted. People shouted. The judge banged his gavel. Reporters scribbled furiously. Hutchins retreated, his face pale. When order was finally restored, the judge looked at Aayita with something like respect. "Miss Whitfield, you may step down." But she was not done. "I have one more thing to say." "Then say it," the judge allowed. Aayita looked around the courtroom, at all those faces. "My mother died believing in peace, believing in treaties, believing that people could live together without violence. Captain Cain destroyed that belief. He took everything from my people, our homes, our families, our trust. And then he tried to take our voices, our truth. But he failed. Because I survived, and I am here, and I will not be silent." She sat down. Thunder's head came up, and he licked her hand. The courtroom remained absolutely still. The trial continued for 3 more days. Red Walking Bear testified, describing the aftermath of the attack. 2 other survivors gave their accounts, which matched Aayita's perfectly. Marshal Moss presented evidence of Cain's attempt to silence Aayita, to murder her to protect his secret. The defense tried to argue self-defense, military necessity, following orders, but the weight of evidence was overwhelming. This had not been a battle. It had been a massacre, and Cain had led it. On the 4th day, the jury retired to deliberate. They were gone for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. We find that the actions taken at Fort Sumner on September 12, 1868, constituted murder and crimes against humanity. We find that Captain Garrett Cain, later Colonel Cain, was directly responsible for these crimes. We recommend that his estate be seized and distributed as reparations to the survivors and families of the victims. The courtroom erupted again, but this time with cheers. Justice, delayed by 15 years, had finally been served. Aayita sat perfectly still, tears streaming down her face. Sarah wrapped her arms around her niece and held her as she finally let go of 15 years of pain and grief and rage. Her body shook with sobs, but these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release. Caleb made his way to them through the crowd. He put his hand on Aayita's shoulder, and she reached up to cover it with her own. No words were necessary. They had fought together, survived together, won together. Outside the courthouse, Red Walking Bear stood in the afternoon sun, his face turned toward the sky. When Aayita emerged, he opened his arms, and she went to him. He spoke to her in Apache, words that were both blessing and farewell. "Your mother can rest now," he told her in English so the others could understand. "Her death has been acknowledged. Her story has been told. The spirits are satisfied." "But I am not," Aayita said quietly. "Justice for my mother is good." "But what about justice for me? For the 15 years I lost? For the childhood that was stolen? How do I get that back?" Red smiled sadly. "You don't. That time is gone. But you have something else now. You have a future. You have choices. You have people who love you. The question is not how to get back what was lost. The question is what to do with what remains." That night there was a celebration in Silverton, but Aayita did not attend. She stood on the roof of Sarah's house with Thunder, looking up at the mountains. They called to her, the wild places, the clean air, the wolves who were waiting. Sarah found her there. "You're thinking about going back?" "Yes." "When?" "Soon. Maybe tomorrow. The trial is over. I have done what I came to do. Now I need to go home." "This is home too," Sarah said gently, "if you want it to be." "I know, and I will come back. In the winter, when the snow is too deep. I will come back and learn more words, more reading, more of Mama's stories. But right now, I need the mountain. I need my wolves. I need to remember who I am when I am not being examined and questioned and judged." "I understand," Sarah said. "Will you take Caleb with you?" Aayita shook her head. "He needs to rest. He is old and tired, and the fighting has worn him down. Let him stay here. Be warm, be safe. I will see him in the spring." But Sarah was wrong, because the next morning, when Aayita packed her few belongings and prepared to ride back to the high country, Caleb was already there, sitting on Buck with his rifle across his saddle. "Thought you might want company on the ride," he said. "You should rest. Stay warm." "I've been warm for 6 weeks. I'm sick of it. Besides, somebody needs to make sure you remember the way." Aayita smiled. "I could find that cabin blind." "Maybe, but I'm coming anyway." They rode out of Silverton as the sun rose, turning the snow-covered peaks gold and orange. Behind them the town was waking up. Ahead of them, the mountains waited. Silent, strong, eternal. And somewhere in those mountains, 6 wolves were running to meet them, coming home to their sister, their alpha, their family. 2 days after the trial ended, they left Silverton for the mountains. The ride back to the cabin took another 2 days of steady climbing. Caleb set an easy pace, partly because Buck was getting old like his rider, partly because there was no rush. The trial was over. The danger had passed. For the first time in months, they could simply exist without looking over their shoulders. Aayita rode quietly beside him, her face tilted toward the sky, breathing in the cold mountain air like it was the finest wine. With each mile gained in elevation, Caleb watched the tension drain from her shoulders. The girl who had sat stiffly in courtrooms and parlors was disappearing. The wild thing who belonged to the mountains was emerging again. On the second afternoon, as they crossed a high meadow blanketed in fresh snow, the wolves found them. They came running from the tree line, 6 gray shapes against white, their voices raised in greeting. Aayita slid from her horse and ran to meet them, dropping to her knees as they swarmed around her, licking her face, pressing against her, whining and yipping their joy. Caleb watched from Buck's saddle, his throat tight. This was her real family. These creatures who had raised her, protected her, loved her when the human world had abandoned her. No matter how much time she spent in Silverton, no matter how many words she learned or books she read, this would always be home. These wolves would always be her pack. When the reunion finally calmed, Aayita looked back at Caleb with tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling. Truly, deeply smiling in a way he had never seen before. "They remember me," she said unnecessarily. "Of course they do. You're their sister." "More than sister," Aayita corrected. "I am Alpha. I am mother and daughter and hunter and protector. I am Pack." She stood and whistled once, a sharp, clear sound. The wolves immediately formed up around her, attentive, waiting for direction. She gestured toward the cabin, still half a day's ride away, and they bounded ahead, scouting the path, checking for danger. "They listen to you better than thunder listens to me," Caleb observed. "I speak their language. You speak human language to a dog. Not the same." "Guess not." They reached the cabin as the sun touched the western peaks. The structure looked smaller than Caleb remembered, more weathered. Snow had drifted against the door. The corral fence had a broken rail, but it was still standing, still solid, still home. Aayita dismounted and walked slowly around the clearing, touching trees, examining tracks, reading the mountain the way others read newspapers. The wolves fanned out, marking territory, re-establishing their claim on this place. 3 elk passed through 5 days ago," she said. "A cougar has been sleeping under the east porch. Mice have moved into the cabin walls for winter." She looked at Caleb. "You will need to set traps." "Thank you for the wildlife report," Caleb said dryly. But he was smiling. They spent the rest of the day making the cabin livable again. Caleb cleared the chimney and started a fire. Aayita hunted and returned with 2 rabbits, which she cleaned with quick, efficient movements while the wolves watched hopefully. Thunder, perhaps feeling overshadowed by his wilder cousins, stayed close to Caleb, determined to prove his usefulness by guarding the woodpile. That night they ate rabbit stew by firelight. Aayita sat on the floor near the hearth, more comfortable there than in a chair. The wolves were outside, curled in the snow, their breathing visible in the cold air. Thunder had claimed the space between Aayita and Caleb, bridging the gap between human and wild. "Are you happy?" Caleb asked. "Being back?" "Yes. But different happy than before. Before I did not know other way. I thought this was only way to live. Now I know there are choices. Town, people, learning. But I choose this. I choose mountain. That makes the happy stronger. You understand?" "I do. Choosing something freely is different than just accepting what you're given. Your mother would be proud of you, Aayita. You've honored her memory, told her story, made sure the world knows what happened. But trial is finished. Cain is dead. Justice is served. So why do I still feel empty inside? Like something is missing?" Caleb poked at the fire, considering. "Because justice doesn't heal everything. It's necessary, but it's not enough. You spent 15 years surviving, then 6 weeks fighting. Now you have to learn the hardest thing of all, how to live." "I know how to live. I lived for 15 years. "No, you survived for 15 years. Living is different. Living means having purpose beyond just making it to tomorrow. Means building something that lasts. Means connecting to others in ways that matter." He looked at her directly. "What do you want, Aayita? Not what Sarah wants, not what the court wanted, not what I want. What do you want?" She was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. The wind whistled outside. Finally, she spoke. "I want both. I want to be wild and human, wolf and Apache. I want to know words and also know silence. I want to hunt with my pack and also sit at Sarah's table. I want to teach others what I have learned. Show them that you do not have to choose one world or the other. You can be both. You can be whole." "That's a good answer," Caleb said. A hard path, but a good one. Will you help me? Will you stay here in summer, teach me more skills, then go to town in winter, remind me how to be with people? For as long as I'm able, Caleb promised. But I'm 64 years old, girl. I'm not going to be around forever. Then we make the time we have count, Aayita said firmly. No waste, no regret. We live, really live, like Mama wanted, like Sarah wanted, like you wanted when you came to this mountain. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, a weight he had carried for 3 years since Sarah's death. She had told him to live, not just exist. He had tried. God knows he had tried. But it was not until this moment, sitting in this cabin with this extraordinary girl and her wolves, that he finally understood what Sarah had meant. Living was not about duration, it was about purpose, connection, legacy. All right, he said, then let's live. The winter passed in a rhythm as old as the mountains. They hunted together, Caleb teaching Aayita how to track in snow, how to read weather signs, how to preserve meat for lean times. Aayita taught Caleb the wolf language, the subtle body movements and sounds that communicated complex ideas without words. In the evenings they worked on her reading and writing. Caleb had brought books from town, simple ones at first, then more complex. Aayita devoured them all, hungry for every story, every idea. She kept a journal now, writing in it each night by firelight. Some entries were in English, some in the broken Apache she was relearning, some were just drawings, visual stories of her days. Thunder grew older and slower but seemed content. He had earned his rest. The wolves accepted him as part of the pack, though they never fully let down their guard around him. He was still too much dog, too much domesticated, to be truly one of them. In late March, when the snow began to soften and the first green shoots appeared on the south slopes, Sarah arrived. She came with 2 mules loaded with supplies, and with her was a surprise, a child. The girl was perhaps 8 years old, Apache, with huge dark eyes that had seen too much. She rode tucked against Sarah's back, silent and watchful, flinching at every sound. Aayita came out of the cabin when she heard the horses. Her eyes widened when she saw the child. "Who is this?" "Her name is Naylin," Sarah said as she dismounted. "It means maiden. She was found 3 months ago, wandering alone near the ruins of Fort Sumner. Her family, her entire camp, was killed by a fever." Sarah paused, then pulled something from her coat, a small beaded necklace, the pattern faded but still visible. "The Indian agent found this with her. Look at the pattern." Aayita took the necklace, her breath catching. She recognized it, the same spiral design her mother had worn, the same pattern she had seen in her dreams. "Her grandmother and your mother were sisters," Sarah said quietly. "Naylin is your cousin, your blood family." Aayita's hands trembled. "Family," she whispered. "I have family." "You always did," Sarah said. "The wolves, me, Caleb, and now Naylin." Aayita approached the child slowly, the way she would approach a wounded animal. She spoke softly in Apache, words Caleb could not understand but whose meaning was clear from the tone. Gentle, reassuring, safe. Naylin looked at her with those huge, haunted eyes. Then her gaze drifted past Aayita to the wolves, who had emerged from the tree line. Instead of fear, Caleb saw recognition flash across the child's face. Naylin slid from the horse and walked directly toward the largest wolf, the alpha female who had been Aayita's surrogate mother. She held out her hand, palm up. The wolf approached, sniffed, then licked the small hand gently. Naylin's face crumpled. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around the wolf's neck and sobbed. The wolf stood still, patient, letting the child empty her grief into thick gray fur. Aayita knelt beside them. She put her hand on Naylin's back and spoke in Apache, a stream of soft words that gradually calmed the sobbing. When the child finally pulled back, Aayita wiped her tears with gentle fingers. "She asks if she can stay," Aayita translated, looking up at Sarah. She says the wolves are calling to her. She says she understands them. Can she stay? Sarah asked. With you? At least for the summer? I'll take her back to town in winter, work on her education. But I think she needs this. Needs to heal in the wild before she can face the civilized world. Aayita looked at Caleb. He nodded. We've got room, and she'll learn a lot. Might be good for both of you. Give you someone to teach, to care for. Then she stays, Aayita said. She took Nalin's hand. Come, I show you where to sleep, where to wash, where the wolves den. You will be safe here, I promise. Over the next weeks, Caleb watched something remarkable happen. Aayita became a teacher. She showed Nalin how to move quietly through the forest, how to track, how to read signs, how to communicate with the wolves. But more importantly, she showed the girl that survival was possible, that trauma did not have to define you, that you could be broken and still become whole. Nalin began to speak again, first in whispers, then in full sentences. She laughed for the first time when one of the wolf pups tried to climb a tree and fell into a snowbank. She cried when Aayita told her story, recognizing her own pain in it, but finding hope in how it ended. You teach her well, Caleb told Aayita one evening as they watched Nalin play with the wolf pups in the clearing. I teach her what I learned. That family is not just blood. That home is not just a place. That you can lose everything and still find something worth living for. Your mother would be proud, Caleb said. You're giving that girl what you never had, a guide, someone who understands. Not just her, Aayita said quietly. Sarah told me there are others, more orphans, more children broken by violence and loss. She wants to create a place for them, a school, where they can learn both worlds, Apache and white, wild and civilized. She wants me to help her. Will you? In time. First, I heal. Then, I teach Nalin. Then, maybe, we help others. Build something bigger. A legacy. Is that the right word? Legacy? That's exactly the right word, Caleb said. As summer deepened, the rhythm of their lives took on a quality that felt timeless. Aayita and Nalin would disappear into the mountains for days with the wolves, returning with meat and stories and a wildness in their eyes that gradually softened near the cabin fire. Caleb worked on expanding the cabin, adding a second room for the girls, repairing the corral, building a smokehouse for preserving meat. Sarah visited twice more, bringing supplies and news from town. The reparations from Cain's estate had been distributed. The Apache survivors were using the money to buy land, to establish themselves legally so they could not be moved again. Red Walking Bear was working with the government to establish a formal school for Apache children, one that would honor their language and traditions while teaching them how to navigate the white man's world. Things are changing, Sarah told them. Slowly. Too slowly. But changing. Your testimony started something, Aayita. People are asking questions, demanding accountability. You made a difference. I did not do it to make difference, Aayita replied. I did it for Mama. But if it helps others, that is good. In August, Thunder died. He went peacefully, in his sleep, curled near the fire as he had been every night for years. Caleb found him in the morning, cold and stiff, but with his face relaxed, almost smiling. They buried him on a rise overlooking the cabin, where the view stretched for miles. Caleb dug the grave himself, refusing help, his tears mixing with sweat as he worked. Aayita and Nalin gathered stones to mark it. The wolves sat in a circle around the grave, silent witnesses, heads bowed as if they understood what had been lost. He was a good dog, Caleb said when the grave was filled. Loyal, true. Stayed with me when I had nothing else. Accepted Aayita when he could have seen her as threat. Taught Nalin that not all humans are dangerous. He was better than most people I've known. His spirit will run with the wolves now, Aayita said. Free, strong, forever young. They stood there until sunset, saying goodbye to a friend who had bridged two worlds. That night, Caleb sat on the porch alone, feeling his years. His knees ached. His hands were stiff with arthritis. His chest hurt in a way that suggested his heart was not as strong as it once was. He was getting old, running out of time. Aayita came out and sat beside him. "You are thinking about Sarah. Your Sarah." "How did you know?" "Because that is the face you make when you miss someone." "I see it sometimes. When you look at where Thunder used to sleep, when you touch the rocking chair she made for you." "I came to this mountain to be with her again," Caleb admitted. "To die where she wanted me to live. But then you showed up and everything changed. I'm not ready to die anymore. But I'm also not sure how much time I have left." "Then we use the time well," Aayita said. "You teach me everything you know. I write it down. When you are gone, your knowledge stays. Your wisdom stays. You stay in the things you teach us." "That's a kind thought, but I'm just an old mountain man. I don't have much wisdom to offer." "You have everything," Aayita said fiercely. "You taught me that worth is not what others see, is what you choose to do when no one is watching. You taught me that family is who stands beside you, not who shares blood. You taught me that one person can make difference if they are willing to try. These are not small things, Caleb. These are everything." He looked at this girl, this wild, brilliant, damaged, beautiful girl who had become his daughter in all the ways that mattered. "You're going to be fine without me. More than fine. You're going to do great things. Not without you. With you. For as long as we have." The summer ended. Nayland had grown strong and confident, speaking fluent Apache and improving English. She could track as well as Aayita now, could communicate with the wolves, could survive in the wild. But more importantly, she had learned to trust again, to hope again, to believe that the world held more than just pain and loss. When Sarah came to take Nayland back to town for winter schooling, the girl cried. But she went willingly, understanding that learning both worlds meant spending time in both places. "I will be back in spring," she told Aayita in Apache, "and I will bring others, children who need the mountain, who need you." "I will be here," Aayita promised. After they left, Aayita and Caleb prepared for winter. They hunted hard, building up stores of meat. They gathered firewood. They reinforced the cabin against the storms that would come. One evening in late September, as the aspen leaves turned gold and the air held the first real bite of winter, Caleb called Aayita to sit with him. He had something in his hand, wrapped in oilcloth. "I want you to have this," he said, unwrapping it. It was a journal, leather-bound and thick. The first few pages were covered in Caleb's rough handwriting. Instructions for trapping, notes on weather patterns, sketches of animal tracks. Survival knowledge accumulated over 45 years in the mountains. "I'm writing it all down," he said. "Everything I know. For you, for Nayland, for whoever comes after. So the knowledge doesn't die with me." "You are not dying," Aayita said, but her voice trembled. "Not today, but someday. We both know it. I'm 65 now. My heart's not what it was. I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, you'll keep teaching. You'll take in the lost ones, the broken ones. You'll show them what you showed Nayland, that survival is possible, that healing is possible, that there are still good people in this world worth trusting." "I promise," Aayita whispered. "But you still have time. Years, maybe." "Maybe," Caleb agreed. "But whether it's years or months or days, let's make them count." Winter came hard that year. The snow piled deep. The wind howled down from the peaks. Caleb's health declined slowly but steadily. His breathing grew labored. He moved less, rested more. But his mind stayed sharp, and every evening he added more pages to the journal, determined to empty his knowledge onto paper before it was too late. Aayita cared for him with the same fierce devotion she showed her wolves. She hunted for both of them. She kept the fire burning. She read to him from books, and he corrected her pronunciation and explained words she did not understand. They were teaching each other until the very end. In February, Sarah arrived unexpectedly with news. Red Walking Bear had passed away in his sleep. The old Apache had gathered his family around him, told them he had lived a good long life, and was ready to join his ancestors. He had left a message for Aayita. "He said to tell you that you are the future," Sarah relayed, her voice thick with tears. "He said you proved that our people can adapt without losing who they are, that we can walk in both worlds and be stronger for it. He said he died happy, knowing you were out here, carrying on the traditions, keeping the old ways alive while embracing the new." Aayita took the news quietly, but that night Caleb heard her crying softly. He could not go to her, lacked the strength, but he called out, and she came to sit beside his bed. "Everyone I love leaves," she said. "Mama, Red, Thunder. Soon you." "That's the price of love," Caleb said gently. "If you love people, you lose them eventually. But the alternative is never loving at all. And that's not living, Aayita. That's just existing. You taught me that. Now I'm teaching it back to you. How do I keep going when everyone is gone? You remember them. You honor them. You do the things they taught you. And you love again. Love Nolan. Love Sarah. Love the children who will come. Love your wolves. Love this mountain. Fill your life so full of love that there's no room for grief to take root." "Is that what you did after your Sarah died?" "No," Caleb admitted. "I came up here to die. I gave up. But then you showed up, and you reminded me what living looks like. You saved my life, Aayita. I came to the mountain broken, and you made me whole again. That's your gift. That's what you give to people. You show them that broken things can be mended, that lost things can be found, that even in the darkest times, there is still light." She took his gnarled hand in hers. "Then I will keep giving that gift. For you, for Mama, for Red, for everyone who believed I could be more than just a wild thing." "You were never just a wild thing," Caleb said. "You were always exactly what you were meant to be. It just took the world a while to understand that." 3 weeks later, on a clear, cold morning when the sun turned the snow to diamonds, Caleb woke gasping. Aayita was at his side instantly. "Caleb, what is wrong?" He smiled, his eyes distant. "Nothing's wrong, girl. I see her. Sarah. She's standing right there by the window. She looks young again. Beautiful." His hand gripped Aayita's weakly. "She's smiling, telling me it's time." "No." Aayita's voice broke. "Not yet, please. I am not ready." "You're more ready than you think," Caleb whispered. His breathing was shallow, labored. "You don't need me anymore. Haven't for a while now. You're going to do such great things. Lead so many children home." He coughed, winced. Tell them that broken things can heal, that lost things can be found, that family is a choice. I will tell them." Tears streamed down Aayita's face. "I promise." "Good girl." Caleb's eyes closed. His voice was barely audible now. "Tell the mountain, thank you for keeping its promise." His hand went slack in hers. Aayita sat there for a long time, holding his hand, feeling it grow cold. Thunder whined and pressed against her leg. The wolves gathered outside, silent witnesses to the passing of a good man. When Sarah arrived an hour later, she found Aayita still sitting there, her face wet with tears but her expression peaceful. "He saw her," Aayita said quietly. "At the end, he saw his Sarah. He was not afraid. He was happy. Then he died well," Sarah said, putting her arm around her niece. "That's all any of us can hope for." They buried him next to Thunder, on the rise overlooking the cabin. Aayita carved his name into a wooden marker with her knife. Below his name, she carved words he had taught her. "He taught me to live." Sarah came for the burial, and Nolan and a dozen others from town who had known Caleb and respected him. They stood in the cold and told stories about his honesty, his courage, his stubborn refusal to let injustice stand, his unexpected gentleness with broken things. After everyone left, Aayita stayed on the rise alone, watching the sun set behind the peaks. The wolves came and sat with her, a silent presence. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in that wind, Aayita thought she heard laughter. Sarah's laughter, Caleb's laughter, her mother's voice singing a lullaby. The peaks had given her everything she needed: survival when she was lost, family when she was alone, purpose when she was adrift. And now, in this moment of loss, it gave her strength to continue. Spring came, as it always does. Nalin returned, and with her came 2 more children, orphans, traumatized, silent. Aayita took them in without question. She taught them to hunt, to track, to listen to the wolves. She taught them that broken things could heal, that lost things could find their way home. That family was a choice, not an accident. By summer, word had spread. The wolf woman who took in lost children, who taught them survival and hope, who showed them that you could honor your past while building your future. More came. The cabin expanded. A second structure was built, then a third. Sarah moved to the mountain permanently, bringing her teaching skills, her books, her endless patience. Together, she and Aayita created something unprecedented, a school that taught Apache language and white language, survival skills and mathematics, wolf communication and literature, a place where children could be whole, not fractured, where they could honor all parts of themselves. 5 years after Caleb's death, Aayita stood on the rise beside his grave. She was 22 years old now, confident and strong. Behind her the compound bustled with life, 15 children ranging from 6 to 16, some Apache, some white orphans, some mixed blood, belonging nowhere until they found this place. She held Caleb's journal in her hands. It was worn now, pages filled with his writing and hers, knowledge and stories intertwined, a legacy in leather and ink. "We did it," she said to the marker. "We built something that lasts, something bigger than us. You taught me how to live. Now I am teaching others. The chain continues. Your wisdom does not die." A young girl, perhaps 9, came running up the hill. "Aayita, the mama wolf has pups, 6 of them. Come see." Aayita smiled. New life. Always the cycle continued. Death and birth, loss and finding, grief and joy. "Come on," she said to the girl. "Let us go welcome the new pack members." As they ran down the hill together, the afternoon sun painted the mountains gold. Eagles circled overhead, wolves howled in the distance, and if you listened very carefully, you might have heard the mountain itself singing. A song of promises kept, of lives well lived, of love that transcends death and time and all the darkness the world can throw at it. Aayita had come to the mountain as a stolen child. She had survived as a wild thing. She had fought as a warrior. And now she lived as a teacher, a guardian, a bridge between worlds. The mountain had kept its promise. And so had she. And in that keeping of promises, in that choice to honor the past while embracing the future, in that refusal to let trauma define her, Aayita had found something precious. She had found herself. She had found home. She had found the one thing that Caleb and Sarah and her mother in red had all tried to teach her. She had found what it means to truly live,